Hello there, and welcome to episode 7 of the Not So Casual Gamer podcast. This bit sounds scripted. Lewis, how are you doing today?
I am quite fine because, well, I'm slightly nervous because this is a doozy. And
another doozy. You're getting doozies left, right, and centre.
A different kind of doozy because depending on who's listening and their views on things, it could be filled with hot takes. So I'm gonna, this is kind of a topic and area of thought that I've been quite passionate about in terms of how I view games and interpret them and all the rest of it. And yeah, it's a big one for me.
Well, before we get hot and heavy with the deep dark material, we can just have a little chat about what we've been playing. It's been quite an interesting
turn of events.
It's been quite an interesting turn of events. I'll start myself. I have been I bought an Xbox.
Oh my god, whoever thought we were Sony ponies? Who said that? Well, you're wrong.
Who said we were Sony ponies? No, Lewis and I were talking. It was quite fairly, I want to say like a sort of off the cuff decision, but when they announced the Xbox, it's a Series S, by the way.
Game Pass
when
machine.
They announced both, it's a Game Pass machine. Yeah, when they announced both the Xbox consoles, we did sit and watch and go, yeah, I'm going to get one of those. A long story short, we're sort of installing some, like a new TV unit, and everything's going to be all wall mounted and cables all tidy. So I really just wanted to kind of get it out of the way before. I didn't want to set all that up and then want to buy something and go, hello, we need to install another couple of cables. So I was like, I'll just bite the bullet. And so I don't have much to report on that. I will have much more to say next time because I downloaded 15 games yesterday onto the system, and they're still downloading, and all I've played on it is Skate 3, which is incredible to say that I'm playing Skate 3 on a current machine, which I like.
Boy, you got a backlog now. No excuses for y'all now.
Exactly. I've plenty to play, but also what I'll say straight off the bat is that quick resume feature is incredible. So there's my top level thing, that being able to turn the Xbox on and immediately just get straight back into the game that you're playing, or switching between games, which I've not done yet because I've only had one game installed, the others were installing. So I will report back with my findings. I'm going to be finishing the podcast today and jumping into Forza Horizon 4, which is the first Forza game I will have ever played. So
it's exciting because I am hoping to follow you closely behind.
Yes. That's where the conversation. This is how we discovered that we're both kind of thinking about this, and
because I suppose I have because I'm so sad. I have quite a meaty CEX voucher built up, really quite a lot, stemming back from trading in the PS4 and then just building up with stuff and kind of not really knowing what to use it on, and I've got a couple of things here and there, but it's still north of 200 just now. So and I'm like, why don't I just get a Series S and
just call it the Game Pass machine?
Because there's definitely always still been some that I've wanted to play, particularly the Ori games. That's our kind of ones that we've looked at mostly. So that'll be exciting when I also decide to pull the trigger on that. But
a quick aside before you say what you are playing. Did you know that it's not CEX? It is sex.
No, I know. I don't. I
didn't know that, and I have to say, because I remember when that shop first started kicking about, we were all young. It says sex, and then we're like, but surely not. And it is.
No, it is.
It is. There you go.
Which is odd.
Going to the sex shop, which is odd. So yes, but you have been. Other than that, it's really just been Warzone. I'm still waiting 2 weeks until Ratchet and Clank, so I will be getting that.
That's your next,
most likely
big
day
boy.
One. That's my next big boy. I mean, I'm guessing reviews will come out beforehand, but to be honest, there's not much that's putting me off from what I've seen. In fact, the more I see of it, the more I'm like, ooh, day one. So I will have more PlayStation-y things going on in the next couple of weeks. But this Xbox, I've got some time here to give some Xbox games a try, and I will finally play a Halo game. and then probably not like it. But who knows? We'll see.
Hey, at least you can say you tried.
Exactly. I'm going to give them a fair shake.
I'm gonna wait for Infinite just because I played a bit of it back in the day when I was on Xbox.
When you were on Xbox, yeah.
And I was never that into it, so I kind of know what to expect for the older ones. But I'm just for the sheer shiny newness of Infinite,
Of course.
the intrigue. Of that.
Regardless of what I feel about any of the old ones, I still will. I mean, it's day one with Game Pass. I mean, that's incredible. So I will play Infinite as well.
Totally.
Kind of regardless of what happens with any of the other games I experience. But you've been playing something that I know a good bit about.
Well, I'll just quickly get out of the way that I have already finished Resident Evil 8. That was like a one and done.
Oh, sorry.
It was about
That's not the one I know things
No,
about.
I know, because it was literally like a one and done. I already traded it in to CEX, which is hilarious. I was like, with these kind of games, it's like I really like them, but I scarcely ever see myself replaying these linear single player games unless they're truly special and I want to keep them around, or they're digital, in which case it doesn't matter. But 10, 11 hours, perfect length, great pacing. Really just quite a it's hard to describe, like a retro modern classic Resident Evil romp, almost like a first person Resident Evil 4 in a lot of ways, and it's kind of what you'd expect from something like that. It's great. Probably didn't like it as much as 7 because 7 was a more horror focus for me, and I me, I love my the scarier the better. Give it me.
Yep.
Give it me.
Give it me.
There were still moments, but good game. And so then I moved on to Miles Morales. Finally, it kind of dropped to I think 30 in CEX. So I was like, sure. Another 10-hour game. Like your PS5 experience. It's just nice to have all the kind of shiny new stuff going on with the controller, and oh my god, it looks so good.
Yeah,
it is the slickest game I've ever played. That's the key word, I think.
What mode are you playing it in?
Oh, performance ray tracing.
Performance ray tracing. See, that only got added after I'd fully platinumed the game, so all I've really experienced with performance ray tracing is like just swinging about, and it is incredible. So I know it kind of makes me want to just like play it again, but I'll wait down the line because I've already played the story twice to get that platinum. So
no, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, when you have that sensation of the totally smooth 60 frames going on with a fast game like Spider-Man, and then also noticing like the really intense ray tracing going on in it, because there's a lot of reflections in that game.
It's all glass.
Yeah, but oh my goodness, the production value on it is immense.
See the sort of indoor scenes. I'm thinking of the first fight when you go to Roxxon Plaza for the first time, and
Roxxon.
Yeah, and it's full of red lights, so that's quite appropriate. But you're indoors and you're sort of rummaging through, and there's like a fight in a room full of what looks like just like big processing towers, just big buttons and beeps and boops and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like a sort of, I don't know, like almost a marble floor or something, and the sort of red neon light sort of glowing in, and the floor and the destruction, like the glass is
it's sensational.
It reminded me almost of like of Control, like maybe not to the same extent, but like papers
totally.
flying and particles, and it was my first PS5 experience other than Astrobot. I played that first while that was all downloading, and in fact I think I made sure I finished Astrobot fully first before I moved on. But like I said, I platinumed it pretty much, and played that, and then played the remastered story of the first game again, and then played Miles Morales again. So I was like Spider-Man, oot my nut.
Yeah.
The first sort of 2 weeks of the PlayStation, but that's the first time that it was the first experience of having a slider, like do you want performance, do you want ray tracing, or 60 FPS or ray tracing 4K, and I put it to 4K quality mode effectively first, and I was like, oh, this game looks amazing, this looks fantastic. And then I think I remember, because you were kind of like, oh no, it's always going to be the best looking version, and you've got the best of both worlds with that update.
I used to be a frame rate skeptic.
Yeah, well, absolutely, but I kind of only really had experienced a higher frame rate on games like, you know, Call of Duty and things like that. So to swap it and then instantly see the difference, like it is night and day. Like I just can't go back to playing those games at 30.
The watershed moment for me after, you know, starting this new generation was, you know, when they gave away the PS5 version of Control on PlayStation Plus, which I was really excited for, and it obviously came with all that sort of stuff. And same thing, started out on the more graphic intensive 130 frames, and even before I switched it, I was like, oh, this seems like really quite choppy. Like, let me just flick it over and see if my graphic horism can take a back seat. And I was like, oh my goodness me, it is almost like it's not even like a graphics thing. It's a feel thing. It's a game thing. It feels as if
feels so much better.
The game plays better. Yeah. Particularly for fast moving stuff. I mean, Control, like you said, is sort of a similar thing to Spider-Man in some ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of mobility and
so
for sure.
There definitely will still be experiences where 30 will be okay, but
of course. Yeah.
But it's never not going to be noticeable now. Like, it's just an inherent thing for video games. Like, it just makes so much sense because you're obviously supposed to be in this world in a kind of realistic way in terms of movement. So it just makes sense.
It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I don't know if it was picked up on the microphone, but a bird just flew into my window. And smacked off the window and then fell down.
Oh, I never heard it. Wow.
Okay. It was I got such a you in the middle of your conversation. You're like thing there, and I went, oh okay, you're fine.
Well, that'll be interesting to hear if your mic picked that up. But I never heard it.
I'm gonna go back and have I had a wee look at the waveform after, and I was like, no, I'm not seeing anything there, so it should be fine. But yeah, let's wrap on that. We'll have more to say.
Well,
in the coming.
I actually have a segue out of this.
Oh, a segue.
I'm taking over.
Of course.
I'm taking over this episode.
You take over because I think I know where you're going.
There was one other thing that I have been playing recently, and that is the just talking. See, this all is all tied in together because they patched. In 60 frames mode to The Last of Us 2 Part 2.
Yep,
and
they certainly did.
I was like, you know what? On PS5, they've boosted it a bit. It's not played it since it came out.
Which is almost a year ago. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's been a fast year.
You know, I'm playing on a better display and everything, so I'm like, let me just jump back in and see if I can get lost in it again. And I have for a few hours. I think it's probably maybe slightly too soon for me now to commit through the whole thing, and now especially
it's definitely too soon for me. Like, and this is, you know, like disclaimer at the top. These are like our favorite games of all time. But if you've played it, you know how heavy that game is. Like, it's a lot to you know, it's a lot to go. This sounds so dorky because we're talking about video games, but this actually comes to our point. Like, it was a lot to go through as a fan of these stories. You know, and people will laugh at that, and that's kind of what actually one of our points. We don't need to apologize for that. You know, this game is art, and I think it's potentially even worse. In quote unquote, like going through it again, knowing what's coming. You know what I mean? Like, just like, oh, it's, you know, this bit, like, it's going to be hard to play through or something. You know?
Yeah, I mean, so. Part of the thing that I wanted to do, just to up the kind of survival immersion thing, was do a hardcore playthrough, which is not the absolute top difficulty, but the second top, and you know, it's like a nice level of hard, and I almost kind of wish I did it for my playthrough just to kind of make it this ultimate experience, but. There's always that fear that it would ruin it for you because you just can't get past this one bit or whatever. But
oh yeah, no, I never have that inkling.
No, it's been interesting just to go back into that world again and just feel the technical prowess of it coming through the screen and just the audio design and all of it. But we'll get into all of this.
Oh yes, we will.
So it really
we've segued. I played the museum scene, with the space shuttle again, just to just again wanted to see what it was like at 60 frames per second, but just I've jumped into that scene a couple of times just because it is so good. In the past year. But yeah, that kind of takes us to our question, and Lewis is kind of going to sort of take the reins on this because I'm equally as passionate about him, let it be known, but Lewis can kind of word some of this a little bit better. So we can bounce this off each other.
I will try to articulate, but
well, anyway,
it's not always easy for me.
As you can tell by the title of the episode, this is The Last of Us Part 2, do gamers need to grow up? The short answer is yes. Right. Thanks very much for listening, everyone.
Goodbye.
Yeah, okay. So, Lewis, I'm going to pass it over to you. So, you came to me with this topic, and instantly I was on board. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And we sat and kind of planned out. We've got some bullet points. So we kind of have the same notes here. You've got a couple extra since we.
I don't have that main document up.
Cool. I will fill time. I
actually do have my own list of notes that became quite sizable.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
So maybe you could just go off of that one, and I'll go off of mine.
Yeah, sounds good.
I don't know.
Well, we're gonna. The question is, this sounds like I'm pure filling now, but no, I'm not. Do gamers need to grow up? This is kind of surrounding. We'll maybe be spoiling a bit of The Last of Us Part 2, so.
Spoiler alert.
We'll put a spoiler alert out here. So I would say, come back to the episode, if you've not played it, or you just don't care and you want to kind of know or you already know what's going on. But effectively, we're talking about the controversy around the launch or pre-launch when there was the leaks, the way that the leaks were interpreted, sometimes correctly, sometimes incorrectly. We'll go into that, and effectively how it was, review bombed by the general public, but seen as a critical darling by people that actually know what they're talking about. So, but there's this sort of extreme to either side that you kind of fall on. There's no real middle ground with this game.
Listen, it's
in the sort of public eye anyway.
We're going to do our best here, but this could easily be like a 20,000 word thesis in somebody's sort of literary course or whatever.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to how you could talk about Last of Us 2 and how it fits into gaming culture and the perception of it, because it's fed into the culture wars of recent years, and just analysing it as a game when it comes to its various aspects like gameplay and obviously storytelling. There's so many layers about this, and actually it kind of leads into a wider question for me of, well, do gamers need to grow up? Yes, in terms of how Last of Us 2 was review bombed, which was ridiculous in our view.
It's just unacceptable, not just because it is a favourite kind of game of ours, but even just taking that away, the fact that effectively review bombing is just meaning that people are voting these things at a 0. And that's just not conducive to any real conversation. That's
no, and
you know what I mean.
And so the wider thing for me is gamers as a stereotype, right? Mm-hmm. There's been chatter over the years of, well, do we want our art form and pastime to be taken more seriously? Yes. Mm-hmm. How do we achieve that? Well, let's maybe encourage more art in the art form, and not just. You see, this is where I knew it would get difficult for me to try and articulate it without just being completely and utterly offensive to some true gamers. And there's a thing, right? your mom is always going to think, oh, it's just a wee toy. Like, you'll never grow up. You need to grow out of these games. If you don't, like, we need to actually, I know they talk about vote with your wallet and stuff. It's so hard. It's so hard. The games industry is really weird because I'm going to talk about things like generic stuff in gaming and how that's a problem. One-dimensional characters being rife, and the idea, right, is The Last of Us 1 and 2, and a big reason why it is, I think, our favourite thing ever, is because it goes above and beyond what most games do. It pushes the art form further than anyone else has. Now, yes, you will hear some that argue and say, oh, but that's its own type of thing. It's pushing for cinematic quality. Cool. But there's plenty of games that sit in the middle space of, okay, this is what? This is a third-person action open world game or first-person game, right? Where you're playing through it, there's objectives. There is a story and there are characters there to push you along and to give you a reason to play these games. The vast majority of these things in these games are trash. Why is that? Why is it that we're struggling still for enough other games to even at least try and push for character development and just something a bit different, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, also, you know, on that point, we still like those games and a lot of elements
totally.
of those games.
No,
you want to make that clear. Like, but it is, you know, The Last of Us is a step beyond to us, and there's maybe another kind of handful of examples that really try to push storytelling in such a way, but that's always what's brought up first with The Last of Us. Oh, that's the story. And to be honest, I agree, because it's an amazing enough story for me to be able to play the game, because as we know, I'm not a horror fan. And I know that, you know, it's not an outright horror game, but there's definitely moments between the first and second game that are terrifying, and I will play those. You know, we were talking about this the other day. What was it? Resident Evil we were talking about, and you were like, "Oh, I think that Last of Us Part 2 is scarier in moments," or I can't remember what game it was, and I was like, "Yeah, but I won't play that even if I've experienced scarier stuff, because there's not that story, there's not those characters pushing me through."
So that is, this episode's going to be a total mess, by the way, but like, we're going to do our best. I'm probably just going to riff on whatever tangent we've got going and try and bring in points. So
I do apologize.
Good. No, but this is fine, because this is how it's going to go. So Resident Evil, right?
Yeah.
Good example, good comparison, right? I love those games, but I am well aware that even just this recent one, right? Resident Evil 8, main character Ethan Winters, absolute garbage. Like, the voice acting is probably some of the worst ever in games. The core premise, nothing to write home about. It's not, obviously, fucking hell, like the Resident Evil films completely tank. They're terrible. No surprise there. You don't play. So the reason why those games are a success is because, you know, they deliver on what they're supposed to in terms of, you walk through a corridor, you get scared. There's some survival gameplay that feels appropriate to get you through those situations, and it does its thing well. That's its thing. Now, obviously, I would love if the sort of storytelling elements of the Resident Evil games were better, but I'm aware that it just doesn't quite work like that for those games. The priorities lie elsewhere. But I think it's true to say that there's plenty of other games in that space, you know, like just like what I said earlier, where sometimes those elements fall flat so hard, like Days Gone, that I'm really put off by it. And because the rest of what that game is seems so generic to me, I'm like, well, I feel nothing for this game. Like, why should I care about this game? Like, what is the worth of Days Gone, for example, compared to The Last of Us and other open world games and survival games that have happened? It's just completely generic. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. Like, I think, it's not, it's not to take away from the work that so many people put into these games. And
I know it's really.
I feel
harsh,
like I'm going to be a disclaimer man for your hot takes, but because I know what you mean. Like, I just don't, I don't want anyone to think like,
there's just a sense that gamers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the sort of, especially now with echo chambers that get created online, and that is the public perception that gets put out there. The voice of the gamers, and also what non-gamers see being said, and what's advertised, and what's popular. It's as if we're just kind of accepting like subpar art, right?
Accepting mediocrity in a lot of in certain aspects of games, because as you're saying, non-gamer, your mum looking in won't appreciate that gaming is actually is in our opinion, but I think could be a public opinion if people understood, the best form of storytelling. There's player agency. There's in some cases player decision. There, like depending on you're thinking Telltale games, you're thinking Mass Effect or something. There is so many more avenues to go down than and that's why even like you hear a lot of people. I mean, every video game is getting adapted into a movie or a TV show these days, but you hear people saying, I'd rather that game gets adapted into a TV show, which The Last of Us is. I don't really think it needed to be, but if it's going to be, I'd rather.
No, I don't.
Do you know what I mean? Because there's this like long form kind of,
absolutely.
reality with TV.
It detracts from it.
Kind of mimics video games. I still wouldn't say to the full extent, but the moments that, like, because you are controlling this character, you are controlling Joel in part 1, you are controlling Ellie in part 2, you are effectively walking a mile in their shoes because you have to, you with this. And the fact that there are games like Days Gone that kind of just want you to, I feel like, because you're thinking we're comparing these as like zombie games, right? I'm trying to word this, like articulate this best. I feel like The Last of Us has influenced its story around the fact that it is a game. So it's using the fact that you are going to be spending the miles, the time with these characters,
long
and the
form
development that you're going to be seeing. I feel like Days Gone is basing its story on the way that zombie protagonists in a generic movie, in a generic TV show would get you. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Maybe that's not like the best.
Yeah,
way,
no, I think we're on the right lines there.
That might not be the best way to word it, but what I mean is, I think that Naughty Dog know that video game storytelling can be different than just storytelling in general, books, TV, movies, or whatever. They can use environmental storytelling, because you can kind of get away with, obviously movies and TV shows will have elements of environmental storytelling, but not in the same, not in the same way as a Last of Us, as a BioShock, as this or that.
There's ways to innovate and push the medium forward that I think a lot of gamers don't realise. I just think we've become a bit stuck in the kind of mainstream perception of what games are right now, in terms of, oh well, they are just bang bang shoot like Call of Duty, bro. When you see adverts for games, it's like, okay, well, I guess this is it forever.
That's the thing.
When there's such a
I don't want this storytelling in like a Call of Duty game. Like, I'm going to Warzone just for good dumb fun. But you can compare this. That's when you bring up games like like Days Gone and stuff like that. That's where I feel like that comparison is most apt. But I do agree that is what is being advertised. That's what's being put out there. That's what a gamer is.
It's more about the perception of it. And okay, I totally get that. It's a much younger form of media than film. Mm-hmm. And perhaps my expectations are too high just now, but hey, I think these conversations need to happen, much like cultural discussions, in terms of, well, if nobody starts shouting about like, we need better art and games, then it'll just be considered child's play forever, and if you're an adult playing games, you'll always be kind of given a funny look later in life. You know, it's this is what I'm trying to get at. So I feel as if a lot of gamers are focusing on the wrong things, and that is a big part of what feeds into the reaction to Last of Us Part 2 and why it has a 57 user score on Metacritic, which is absolutely absurd, right? And I'll tell you why it's absurd. Objectively, this product that's been put out it's so dripping in quality, right? The sheer artistry that's gone in, whether all of the story beats land or not comparative to a great film, or whether it might have some pacing issues as a game, doesn't actually matter, because the sense of realism, the graphical quality, the attention to detail, the character development, which almost all other games scarcely have. Rockstar is another example. They've done well over the years, but
for sure,
they are like the biggest studio ever, so they've got the resources to craft interesting characters and all the rest of it.
But the talent in a team of passionate writers that want to bring a character like Arthur Morgan to life. Do you know what I mean? Like that's, I feel like the sort of the stigma around this. How often, do you play a game where the main character was nothing to write home about? That's how often? But why? Why not? Why not make that main character someone to write home about? Because that's the games that stand out from the crowd. That is your Red Dead Redemption 2. That is your Last of Us. That's your Elizabeth and Bioshock Infinite. That is, that. These are these characters that are in story-based games that come up time and time again. But Ethan Winters isn't in the list of best gaming protagonists, and
nor should he ever be in a conversation of good characters or even close.
But why? I mean, not that it should be as he stands, but why not? Why not put the effort into really?
Well, I don't know. I mean, and obviously we don't know so much about game development. Yes, I know it's hard, but is there not a way to have more of an element to game development studios where that's brought in and just the game is upped? Should we not be now... the bar's been set so high by Naughty Dog. Even with Uncharted, particularly 4. That's some great depth, sensational voice performances.
Voice acting, and motion capture performance, of course.
Yeah, it's all there.
Well, let's call it superb acting in the game, because that's what it is. That's the difference. It's not just voice acting in these games. We bring up the 57 on Metacritic. That is a user score, as Lewis said. The critic score is a 93, which is why on there's times where I use the user score for helping make my decision, especially if it sort of sits quite in line with a critic score. I think that always sits quite nicely. But when there's such disparity between the two, and I mean, I took a note. There's about 37,500 positive reviews and about 35,500 negative reviews. And when we talk about negative reviews, we're talking about, like we said earlier, we're talking about zeros and ones and twos. I am of the mind that if a game is playable from back to front, it has instantly earned to not be a zero. Do you know what I mean? There's no critic in their right mind that would ever number a game like The Last of Us Part 2 at a 0, at a 1,
it's just
at a 2, at a 3. I mean, and the critics don't. The lowest, I think the lowest critic one is like a 6.7, which I think is still definitely too low for my own opinion, but that's the lowest it goes.
These critics are professional writers for a reason, because they're smarter than you. They know what they're talking about. They think deeply about characters and story beats and yes, okay, all the game elements, of course, but I just think it's a shame that as a gaming community we have lambasted this product that actually is it's so far and above so many other games in terms of what it's trying to do, and I knew this would happen. Like, I get so kind of worked up on my head with all these things flying about that I'm like, I don't even know where to take this next.
Well, let's kind of jump into the gameplay element, because obviously we want to spend a bit more time on the story, but the gameplay, that's obviously something that people bring up with The Last of Us, and that's
wrongly,
people,
by the way,
and and I know people that I know people personally that think that the gameplay is bad or repetitive or clunky or things, but I think there's a level of let's call it clunk by design. You are using, and
yet it's so smooth to me.
No, I agree. I think especially with the sort of extra mobility that you've got in 2, but there is a kind of lumbering, heavy feel to the combat, but that works in its favor, in my opinion.
It's a realistic survival horror game.
Yeah, because the way that
what are people expecting
in real life is not, it's not Titanfall. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're not. It's not. The post-apocalypse isn't going to be you like sliding and running and emptying like a full clip and then just like instantly. Even then, there's still elements of The Last of Us gunplay that's just highly unrealistic. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's, as a quote unquote like gun expert would tell you. Do you know what I mean? Because it's still at the end of the day a video game, but it's repetitive. I wouldn't say should ever. That's maybe a bold statement. Should ever come into into question with something like this.
Listen, the only reason you would think that the game of The Last of Us is repetitive is because you've decided that you don't give a shit about the story you're playing through. You're not supposed to be focusing on the game mechanics, which are totally fine to serve its purpose, by the way.
Well, I mean, especially when 2 came out, we were seeing all these amazing clips of like, Ellie running through super aggressive and doing things with like jumping takedowns and things that I'd never even come across in the game. The level of detail, the
contextual animation work.
If you
can you imagine how hard that is to do?
Exactly. At the top of my head, there's one where she like shoots a guy who's in the middle of reloading his gun. He throws the clip up in the air. Ellie catches it and loads it into her gun. I mean, that's kind of badass, but it's like there's so many there's so many new things that if I played through it again, kind of knowing what to potentially look out for, I would see things in that game that I was never able to do.
Exactly.
In the first time through. So in its micro details, it is not repetitive, but also this is coming from the people who will play, and I'm one of them. Well, not the person saying that the game's repetitive, but this is coming from the person who will play a game of Team Deathmatch on Call of Duty over and over on the same map. This is coming from the person who plays Warzone on the same map, Fortnite on the same map. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know that the situational moments in those games are what keep it fresh, because that's why I enjoy those games.
I mostly also see that as like a social activity, by the way.
Yes, of course. So that definitely comes into it. But, it's not for everyone. It can be a solo thing for a lot of people. But at the end of the day, the act of shooting your gun and plating up and buying a loadout and, calling the same gun in again, what I mean? Like, you could argue that is also repetitive, but that is not the reason that you're playing the game. The reason is for the social aspects. It's for the competitive aspects. It's for this. It's for that.
The thrill of succeeding.
The thrill of succeeding.
I'm absolutely.
It's the thrill of getting through that story. And of course, if you turn around and you don't like the story, you don't like these characters,
But you can't. The thing is, people are faulting them for trying to be bold as fuck in their storytelling, and yes, okay, that's like they brought in. Some elements of like, there's a sort of trans side character, but what other game is actually going out of their way to be like, fuck you, we're doing this, like, we are being bold enough to actually, by the way, tastefully do it.
Yep.
They're probably one of the only studios that can actually tastefully do these things, right? Yep. Whether fundamentally, it was like the absolute right thing to do or not. Like, the idea that we're just trashing a game that is the sort of thing that is trying to push it forward as art is just so sad to me, because gamers are focusing on the wrong things.
Exactly. I think that brings us back to our question: do gamers need to grow up? The one thing that I would categorically, that I just cannot get behind, when the leaks came out, the leaks were that Abby was transgender, right? Which isn't true. But
it was made up by neckbeards to try and...
made up by neckbeards.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
but here's the thing. If it was true, why does it matter? Why does that matter? It does not matter. It's just... And they could use that very real and very important topic to further develop a character or a set of characters through this story. It can be used as a storytelling device because, I'm sorry, guess what? Trans people exist. That's just a thing. And it's good that they exist. It's not a problem. So why can't they be used in stories? Why can't a character that you play as be trans? Why is that such a problem? That is just stupid, and you need to grow up if you think that. It ended up not even being true, but there is a trans character. That's kind of where maybe the leaks got misinterpreted. There is a trans character that this character Abby comes across.
Well, and of course the main character Ellie is gay.
Is gay as well, but again, doesn't matter. But she's
nobody
also,
seemed to care when they brought that out 7 years ago.
Exactly.
By the way,
so you're making that up if you care. And also, I'll have to say it's Lev, isn't it? Lev that's trans.
Yes.
I was so busy, like, focused on, like, moments of, post fight or a post set piece or whatever, that I missed that she was trans. Like, I missed that.
I did as well at first, actually.
You know, at first, and then like the more, like, so it wasn't just like Naughty Dog were like trans, like in your face.
No, not at all.
But at the same time, because that's not tasteful. In the same way that just like, like this is the gay game is not, because they're not trying to make a point. They're trying to normalize that is just how storytelling should be used. It's just, that's that character. But that worked for that character because that character was part of a religious cult in the game that were, that was the character's motivation. Effectively, the character leaves that cult and Abby's sort of faction have always been fighting that cult, and that character leaves that cult and kind of, Abby learns, that they aren't all bad, but, a lot of them are, but there's these people that, want to get away from it, that truly care. That is the story incentive for this character. This character being trans is the reason why the story for those characters can progress. So it's not that it's this SJW, it's being woke for the sake of woke. It serves the story. And at the end of the day, if you have even a remotely political issue, but it serves the story, I'm all for it. And that could be in the flip side as well. Like, if like a political thing that I don't agree with, but it overall serves the story, I'm not going to just go, that game's trash, 0 out of 10.
I think it is definitely true to say that The Last of Us Part 2 is going to be quite considered a product of its time. I think it's not a coincidence that these elements have been brought in because of the recent years and the focus that's been on the culture war. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Because
no, I definitely don't.
What, were we just going to like avoid trying to implement these things into stories forever?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like they're just flying the flag for trying to
trying to normalize it.
To be brave with their storytelling.
Yeah.
To actually trying different things, to just add in as much depth to their world and this thing they've created, for better or worse. But the sheer fact that they're doing it means that they win. Like,
yeah, they should be commended for that, absolutely, because they're taking risks that no one else will. And for us, it definitely paid off dividends. You know what I mean? Like, it was, but and there's other big like red herrings in the story that we can go into as well. That they have a problem with, I'd like to talk about. There's a big, the elephant in the room with that game. I don't know if you want to move on to that just now or whatever, but
which is what? Sorry, which bit?
The elephant in the room of Joel, the character of Joel in part 2.
Right. I mean, yeah. Let's touch on it. I mean, I don't actually think it's too important in the grand scheme of things.
Well, there's one point I want to make about it. So yeah, we can talk about that. Like what I was thinking was, I mean, right, okay. Again, spoiler alert. Joel dies quite close to the beginning of the game at the hands of Abby. Now, Abby is, you spend the first half of the game after Joel's death, hunting down all her friends as Ellie in Seattle, and then you are confronted by her, and then it goes back in time to the first day of Seattle, and you're playing as Abby. So that's kind of right. So Joel's killed. Joel's killed at the beginning of the game, and the comments and the leaks. I mean, that was one of the leaks that was true. Although in the leaks they didn't know when it was in the game, so that's still. I missed all the leaks. I didn't see anything, thankfully. So it was still. I mean, I had like from that first trailer, we were like, yeah, Joel's gonna die in this game. You know what I mean? Like it was just one of those like, yeah, Joel's gonna die. Still completely subverted my expectations. Not for the sake of subverting my expectations. It was done in a really, really good way. That whole sort of scene of you approaching the cabin where he's been kept. My heart was just like in my throat the whole time. It was so I was so nervous about what was coming up. Not scared. I was just I was scared for the characters, but I was so nervous. But
it felt real.
It felt real. The whole thing is, right, at the end of the day, I think that the people that say that, oh my goodness, you can't kill Joel's my favorite character, are they've actually missed the point. They've missed the point of The Last of Us Part 1. Joel is not the hero. Now, Joel is also one of my favorite characters, but not like, oh, I love this character, I want to be this character. No, this is, I have played a game where I've seen one of the most complex and realized and well acted and well thought out characters, and that's why he's my favorite. It's not that he's the hero of the game, it's that he is arguably the most flawed. And I mean, the ending of Last of Us Part 1, again, spoilers, but if you've not played it, there is a cure. Ellie is the cure, and Joel stops the cure and kills all the doctors in this hospital and takes Ellie for his own selfish reasons. And he, instantly, I think I spoke to you after I finished the game for the first time. I put my controller down and went, I'm the bad guy. Like, I'm the bad guy of this game. That's incredible. That's unbelievable storytelling that, and I still love this character. There's this conflict. So for Joel to be killed off in the first act, I was upset about it, but because I was in the Ellie shoes. Like, Ellie didn't, obviously there's like flashback scenes that really sort of flesh everything out, but that was Ellie's dad effectively. It's not, but through the the relationship that they have, and so there was this sadness of for her, for us as the gamer that's connected to this game, but he's not the hero, and especially when you find out that Abby's dad was the doctor, or was one of the doctors that the main doctor that he killed. I'm sorry, Abby. If the game was on, if you had played as Abby in the first game, and then at the end of the game, this guy comes in and kills your dad, and part 2 was your revenge quest, you would be like, it's all perspective, and that's the thing, and they're wanting to play with perspective in part 2 and realize that there is a revenge plot to the game, but that's not the story. There's a fantastic video by Girlfriend Reviews on YouTube. Quote. I will read the quote. I will here. But they do this like breakdown of it, and they kind of word thing. I mean, they're pretty much, if you want a 9-minute version of this podcast, go and watch that, because it's like it's really succinct. But they finish it off with this quote that if you reach the credits, so effectively the credits come up and you're strangling Abby in the water, you're drowning her, and then your mind flashes to Joel. I cried at that moment, like I actually burst out crying, and then she stops, and then lets her go. And everyone's like, no, I wanted to have killed Abby. I wanted to have killed Abby. And the quote that they came out when we actually had to type it down: if you reach the credits and wish you could kill Abby, even after walking a mile in her shoes, let it be known that you've played a good, solid, potentially 10 hours of her. Then you may have beat the game you were playing with your controller, but you may have lost the game Naughty Dog was playing with your soul. This was a revenge plot, not a revenge story. In the same way that the plot of Last of Us Part 1 was a countrywide trip to find the cure for this disease. That's the plot. It's the same. If you have a problem with the ending of 2, then by your logic, you have to have a problem with the ending of 1. In my eyes. Because if you can sit and go, this game's amazing, it's this cross-country trek where you're trying to find the cure, and the game ends with no cure, because of your character, or the character that you're playing as, horrendously selfish decisions, then why does this one need to end with revenge? Is it because you hate this character because she killed Joel? Yeah, I hated that character because she killed Joel as well. And when I started playing as her, I went, oh no, like, do I need to play the rest of this game as her? Do I need to play these 3 days as her? And I tell you, by like the first flashback, I was like, I get it. And then you watch Neil Druckmann talk about it, and he's like, we wanted you to feel like, I don't want to play as this girl. I don't want to play as her. She killed Joel. And at the end, I'm not saying I'm better at receiving understanding these stories than you. I'm not claiming these things, but at the end of the game, I did not want. I was tapping square in their quick, button mashing event, saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this, as Ellie is killing Abby. So,
and what game has ever played with your soul like this before, really?
It's
what other games make you feel things like what these ones do,
they're just, for me specifically, there's just not.
Unless you've missed the point and you felt nothing, in which case you've completely missed the point.
I feel sorry. Games. I feel sorry for those that do miss the point of this, because they are missing out on just in our opinion.
It's like they're not. Experience. They must not be taking in the exquisite score that's happening as each moment goes by. They're not taking in the detailed
facial animations, the
animation, the sound design, which pulls you right into those situations and how harrowing they are. They're just, these are gamers that just seem to not care about this stuff.
They want a game. They don't want an experience. They want a game.
Which is the really sad thing for me, because I think there's an opportunity for games to make you feel things, like, because we're in control. Why would you not want to be in control of interactive media that can take you to places that you didn't think you could go? Why, So yes, and that all great sort of piece there on the story, because I think it kind of was a great summation of how a lot of them missed the point of the story, and
but I think if like I said, to sum that up very quickly, if you miss the point of part 2, then you also miss the point of part 1, and the part 1 still might be your favorite game, but I still fear you have missed the point of part 1. And I think the point of part 1 became even more apparent because of part 2. I think if there was just part 1, to be honest, I think there's multiple ways you could interpret that game, and the one that you interpret it, if you still enjoyed the game, is the right one for you. But I think now, with the context of part 2, I think there is a potential cut and dry answer. More so, there was a lot kind of left up to speculation at the end of part 1. I think a lot of that was answered, and just we just keep coming back to it, the quality. It is not a 0 out of 10, because storytelling is an element of a game, but so is combat, so is animation, so is score, so the production. I mean, we listened to a couple of different podcasts that have, one of them coined the term what production per square inch. You know what I mean? Like they were talking about that. It's such a great way to put it up. There's just so much to look at, to see, and just the level of detail is absolutely astounding. It's
yeah. I mean, so we've obviously waxed lyrical about the depth that goes into this particular game. I want to just reiterate again, like, we absolutely believe that there's a place for all the other types of games, RTS games and stuff, of course.
Yeah.
It's more about just being sad at the fact that, there's a certain segment of loud voiced gamers that might drag down the perception of what games can be, and that they can be taken seriously and be more subtle than they perhaps have been, because I think it gives off the idea for a lot of non-gamers that that's not even possible. Like, games are games, like they're called games. It's like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe they need to be called interactive media. Yeah.
I think that's you could have a whole other different tangent discussion about that side of things. But, and just to kind of slightly go off in a different direction, but just coming off of the thread of kind of how we've really deep dived into what is a very PlayStation-centric game and what they've been good at recently, as you can probably imagine at this point. I think one of my points here is, I think that's, for the segment of level-headed folks like us, it's kind of why there's maybe been a bit of a distrust and apathy towards like the Xbox exclusives over the last generation, because they have not had things, like, it's just kind of not been interesting enough. Like, Gears and Halo are very gamey games.
Of course.
And when I think of other examples in the PlayStation sphere and why it became so important to us, particularly, you've got things like God of War as a great example.
I was about to bring up God of War. Could you have imagined a world where Kratos is a well-developed and thought-out and complicated character?
They did it.
Do you know what I mean? Like, they took this, like, brutish, sex-driven demigod or whatever he was, or god, I suppose he is, and from these beat-em-up games that were, by all intents and purposes, gamey games. They were for the massive spectacle, and they were they were hack and slash and all that, and they took this and reinvented it in this kind of Sony first party way, and I think that's also why, and just completely innovated on this character, and I think that's also why Days Gone sticks out like a sore thumb, because it's only ever going to be compared to these. It's a Sony first party game. It's going to be compared.
Just feels weak in comparison.
It just feels weak for the reasons that we're saying that The Last of Us stood out to us. It's the reasons why we're saying Days Gone didn't. Do you know what I mean? Of course, there's a level of production. Of course, it's a.
And by the way, God of War does have fantastic gamey game elements as well. It mixes it all into.
The gamey game elements are fantastic, and the production and the detail and the acting and the camera work.
It's all mixed in so well, and
it's all done so well.
That's
why it got 10 out of 10s.
Yeah, and then so I think of other similar examples. Detroit, I think, does a good job. Now, okay, so the premise of Detroit is quite surface level when you're talking about like a sort of politically inclined story for a game, and the acting's a bit iffy from time to time. It's okay for game standards, but what it does well and what it does something different for in games is how it allows you to kind of change the story, and that sometimes you don't need massive amount of depth in the story itself, because that as a game allowing you to kind of, there's a lot of branching paths, and the interest there comes from, oh wow, they've done a really good job of getting this kind of branching tree thing to work and all intermingle, and the rest of it is good enough.
Level of depth, it's the story elements might not be the same amount of depth, but your playthrough is different to mine. There's a conversation there that can be had I didn't get that bit because I did this. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know it would have gone that way. And
Yeah,
stuff,
and that's why Quantic Dream have been important, because they were trying to push the medium forward by exploring different ways of making you feel things in games and giving you a reason to progress through a game that's not just shooting a gun and getting to the one-dimensional boss.
Well, which is why, take it back. You're thinking about games that innovated, and as much as I don't have a love for it, I will give them credit. Like a sort of Fallout 3. For the same kind of reasons, siding with a faction, and there's an overarching story, and there's a gamey game there. Now, of course, I think that as time has gone on, that in its own way has become generic. It's almost like a sort of but at a time it was a novel idea, and there's maybe going to be a time down the line where The Last of Us looks generic. I would struggle to see what that reality would be.
The only reason that would be is because it popularized the fucking ultra realistic, serious post-apocalypse thing in the first place. That's the only reason why it would become passé. Just like Lord of the Rings back in the day for high fantasy. Like,
what were we talking about? Like, we were talking about like, why couldn't Sam just wear the ring? The other day, he seemed like a strong enough character, and it was like, he was the simple farmhand boy. He wasn't meant to be the hero, and everyone has like turned him into the hero of the story because he's like so good. Anyway, that's fine.
Another time for that one.
When we launch our movie podcast.
Oh Jesus.
You'll need to get your cinema card back for that. What if we kind of obviously we spoke about sort of the correct and incorrect leaks, but there's we spoke about the gameplay a little bit, but I had a point here that was why are some gamers tied to their gaminess? Of course we brought that up, but they kind of compare it to other shooters, but it's it is its own thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, we're back to Last of Us, of course. You take a third person, cover based with some stealth elements or something like that. That I wouldn't even really know what to compare it to, but it's not going to be Call of Duty. It's not even going to be. I don't know. That's a difficult one for me to kind of.
Well, listen, I still have so many. How long have we gone for here?
We've gone for an hour, so.
All right, can we take it another half an hour at least? Because
sure.
I have so much. I still have so many notes, and kind of what I want anyone who's listening to take out of this is it's mostly food for thought. Interpret all of how I see things as you will. I don't hate all games apart from cinematic games. It's not true. I'm just trying to make the case as to why it's so important, sort of thing. But I came up with a term, right?
Oh,
my own
so
phrase.
Copyright, by the way.
Homogenized gamia.
Oh.
Or alternatively, homogenized generica in games.
Could I hear it in a sentence?
So,
can I get the definition?
Okay, so I'm gonna list off some games, and you can sort of maybe have a think about why, what's the common thread here. And they're recent examples because they're fresh in the mind as to why I'm continually becoming disappointed with what's coming out and why it's as if we're not taking step forwards in what games can be. Okay. Outriders.
Okay.
Elder Scrolls Online. Far Cry 6.
Mm-hmm.
We watched the sort of gameplay reveal thing of Far Cry. I've been excited for Far Cry 6 because Giancarlo Esposito is Esposito?
Esposito, yeah.
Yeah, is in the game, fully rendered and giving a performance and stuff, and I'm like, oh wow, Breaking Bad, one of my favorite TV shows, and there's going to be maybe quite an interesting, serious sort of story here that will be politically interesting in terms of a sort of South American thing going on. That's kind of where I thought it would go, and I was just so disappointed to see that they were just making Just Cause 4.
Yeah, it was. We watched the gameplay last night as we're recording this, and I kind of had. I was surprised as well. It was Just Cause / Borderlands /
It is
/ what's the other one? Like Rage, Rage.
Which
2,
are all, it's fine to have these games because they have their own character. They've got their own style, and it's fun to have the kind of exaggerated Sunset Overdrive type games where it's like, oh, look how cool this sort of cartoony world is, and it's just fun. The point, those games are
fun games.
They're just fun, and that's what their purpose is out there to serve.
And they're great. No, I agree. I definitely thought Far Cry 6 in particular was going to be a really interesting, political revolution, which it will be. It is a sort of revolution.
Yeah, like you were going to be put into this world and feel like you had a part to play, and that it was going to mean something to get to the end of that story and be face to face with this, what was hopefully going to be a good character portrayed by Giancarlo. But from what I can see, he's just going to be another copy-paste, one-dimensional Far Cry super villain thing. That was also like, when Kevin Spacey was in Call of Duty, same thing. Just like, oh, he's a bad guy. Okay, like, got to take him down. God,
there's great. Like, because you didn't play Far Cry 5. I did.
No, I was totally I had fatigued on Far Cry, but after 4 was fine. It was like good fun game, I guess, but
Yeah, like there's a part of me that kind of tongue-in-cheek element, that kind of almost kind of comedy slant, wasn't too surprising with 6. It was maybe disappointing, but not surprising.
It's full on. It's like Dead Rising. It's like silly weapons.
Yeah, but
like this is there's such a tonal
inconsistency with it. Yeah,
I had such cognitive dissonance sitting there. I was like, wait, what?
Well, like, in 5 you can get these like animal and human sidekicks, like that sort of you can swap in and out and use them to your advantage, and you can get like a bear to follow you around. It doesn't really make too much sense, but the story overall, there was some kind of comedic moments in 5, but they weren't like slapsticky. They were kind of like, oh, that's funny, but it's kind of real as well, like that kind of cultish religious zealot sort of behavior was kind of funny, but at the same time, like, ooh, that's kind of real and worrying. Like, this is obviously an exaggerated version of. So I really enjoyed Far Cry 5. I did, and to be honest, there's elements of 6 where I'm like, yeah, that still looks interesting to me. But as soon as they bring out something like what's essentially a DIY jetpack and back-mounted rocket launcher and a motorbike engine turned into a Gatling gun, I'm like, this is like this is like Fallout 4's weapon modding bench meets Just Cause. Like, it was, and obviously Just Cause having that kind of South American setting and a lot of their things, it was very reminiscent of that, and I just don't know what they can do in that game to really stand out from just being a generic story, the generic revolution against the dictator story.
You know for a fact there's going to be zero depth there. It's going to go exactly the way you think it will. It's a one-dimensional, like you said, revolution story. Seen it all before. I just think it's such a shame because Ubisoft is such a bad offender, and because their games are so big, they really have to take the blame here, because I feel like we've actually gone backwards. Particularly like Far Cry and Assassin's Creed, right? They're now more generic than they were when they started. How has that happened? Like, the Assassin's Creed games now are completely generic. Like, it's just filled with gamey stuff. Oh, okay, right. It's a huge, beautiful world that is like, oh my goodness, look how big this is and how many places there are. But like, okay, that's nothing new.
That's becoming more of a press. Like, they're taking like more of an onus over that than the storytelling. Storytelling is taking a backseat for, but our world is bigger than the last one now.
We used to like Assassin's Creed because the real cities, ancient cities at points in time, in history felt like they had a soul.
Yeah,
like
they felt
like
alive.
we just really liked getting lost in those cities, and yeah, the parkour element of it kind of made that its USP for it was like really interesting to navigate these places in that way, and they kind of even took that out. I mean, yeah, it's still there, but it's not the focus. Now it's some sort of like,
You weren't an assassin in Odyssey. You were a Spartan. It's like the exact opposite of an assassin, because they like go in and just kick folk. You know what I mean? Like off of big wars and stuff like that. That's not Assassin's Creed.
to me,
But anyway,
it's
yeah.
disappointingly gamey in that sense, and
So your other two examples. Sorry, you've got Elder Scrolls Online and Outriders. We spoke about Outriders. I've got Game Pass now. I've seen one screenshot of Outriders. I've not seen it in motion, because we were talking about getting the Xbox. We were like, oh, why don't we play that together? It's new. People like it. People are digging it. And I mean, I've still to make my own mind up. So I'll kind of take a step back from this point. So what was it you saw? What was it that kind of lumped it in with this?
I just saw gruff, sort of like metallic uniforms, big guns, lots of noise, lots of fizzy bangs. I saw a lot of colourful menus and systems, like voice acting that was as bad as it comes. I don't know. It just looked like the most generic video game that you can think of the last 10 years. Oh, someone's at the door.
Someone's at the door. Our buzzer's so loud. I would say I'd edit this out, but I'm probably not going to. But if I can remember when it was, I will.
And I look at that and I just think, really? Is this what we're accepting now? Like, are we just going to keep getting this? Is this what games are? Like in the mainstream? It just looks so boring. So boring.
Yeah,
I have no interest in that game at all.
I've got no way to.
What's the point?
Judgment, but
what am I supposed to feel when I'm playing this game? What's the point?
I mean, I'm sure some would argue.
Seen it all before.
Yeah,
Cookie
that's
cutter.
an interesting one.
Like, we did this. It was fun when Gears of War sort of did it first 15 years ago, right?
It's plateaued. You know what I mean? It's kind of feels like it's plateaued, because that was novel at a time. It's got a story and people really care about those characters. That's awesome. I think that's really good. But it is like visceral and addicting gameplay and all that stuff that was kind of the forefront of those games, as is my understanding.
Did you just say addicting? Are you American?
Oh, did I? That's what I said. Yes, I am American now. Bang bang, I like guns. So no, that was novel of a time. Do you think, going back to Assassin's Creed, for example, you said like that they're more generic now than they were?
Yep.
Do you think that they have taken a step back, or do you think that it's the same? I know we don't think it's the same, but do you think it's the same, plateaued, and we've just grown to expect more? You could kind of think that with like Fallout 4, for example, or in Skyrim and all that. At one point in time, Fallout 4 is so similar to Fallout 3, right? But Fallout 3 was damn near revolutionary for the gaming industry. So why is this now feeling quite generic for Fallout 4? Is it because of The Witcher 3, kind of raising the bar, and then it's making something that was once innovative pale in comparison?
Well, it's why
me personally, I don't think Assassin's Creed is the same as it used to be. But is that nostalgia talking? Is that
no? It's not.
Do you not think so?
They are completely soulless games. There's far too much meaningless content in them.
Oh yeah, for sure. That I can definitely agree
why can't they refocus their resources into making it a tighter, game which has a really good story and has good facial animations and performance, make it an Assassin's Creed game that's just a more tighter focused experience.
Yeah.
Don't just splurge everything on the wall, because it is very influenced by The Witcher 3, I'd say, the Assassin's Creed games now. They've turned into this Western RPG bloated thing which doesn't have an original bone in its body.
But I would argue with something like The Witcher, it's got this massive lore. Of course, Assassin's Creed has lore as well.
No, the Witcher is incredible because
it's got this fantasy lore. At the end of the day, Assassin's Creed, while there's like a supernatural element to it, it still needs to root itself in and prides itself, and I think rightly so in some aspects, in real world history. So it's more limited. The Witcher can be whatever it wants to be because it is a fantasy world. It's limitless. There's fantasy elements to Assassin's Creed in some ways, some futuristic kind of
But you can
sci-fi
tell
elements.
that they really took the time to put in so much depth and
they had source material for it, like books
exactly,
books and
monster lore and design. It is just like a really interesting, like harsh world that feels real to be in.
Real.
It's like it's really quite a feat when that came out 5 or so years ago, whenever it was, and it put the likes of Skyrim and the rest of it to shame.
To shame, yeah.
It's like this is what's possible.
Where the big games. So yeah, I think so. I would agree. I just wanted to kind of see it from the other point. Could it be deemed as that? But no, I agree. I think that Assassin's Creed is filled with soulless side objectives. I mean, there was a point in time in Assassin's Creed where there was no such thing as side missions. Do you know what I mean? It was just all story missions, like throughout. You did you had to do like what you could now call side missions to discover your target and then assassinate them, but it was all in service of the overarching plot that pushed those games forward and in their plot. So I agree categorically that they are soulless versions of what they once were, and they need to be refocused. I just thought it might have been interesting to think, could you see it as more of a plateau than a regression? But I'd still agree that it is a regression in a story capacity for sure.
Ultimately, there is a good reason for it, and I think it kind of, as much as we love games and the possibilities contained within, it exposes the insidious nature of the industry, because ultimately it always comes down to money.
Yep.
Unfortunately, there is a vast ocean of people who play games that they just, I guess they don't care about being deep thinkers, and money talks, like, what sells, and if they're going to keep making it every year if it sells, because we keep buying it for some reason when it's just the same thing again and again. I just think, is that what we're consigned to be? Like, are we as gamers not supposed to be deep thinkers? Is our art form not allowed to have stuff that is a bit different?
Well, I mean, that's
and I think that plays into mainstream game media is actually lagging behind, I think, as well. Like your likes of IGN and GameSpot, like they're just propping up one-dimensional sort of stuff when you see what they post. Like the likes of girlfriend reviews, they're the real shit, by the way.
Yeah, they're incredible.
The stuff on YouTube,
they're hilarious, but they're also, it's flipping it on its head. Do you know what I mean? It's looking at game reviews from a completely different perspective.
Yeah, those are the types of people that we should be looking towards to understanding deeper what goes into games like The Last of Us and stuff.
Yep.
I think they are important. Not us. We're just like hacks. We're just trying to make sense of it all. But
we're just having the conversations that we would have been having on the couch in front of microphones. That's we'd have probably even have written out points as well. Do you know what I mean? We'd have had a planning document for our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we've done our best. I mean, I just think that it all feeds into, it's like a cycle. It feeds into the machine, and I think the likes of IGN need to be held accountable to some degree, because they will promote what drives clicks and stuff, and it happens to be the most surface level stuff, and what can you do? I don't know.
Yeah, like I feel myself like quite proud. I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've become quite good with voting with my wallet recently. I bought Origins because it was, the first one back after a hiatus, and I was really excited to see what it was. And
Well, same, because we were like, oh, okay, what's this all about? Let's give it a shot.
and also it started off super strong, and then I was like, ooh, there was some definite pacing issues in there, but overall not a bad story. And then Odyssey came out, and it was kind of that like, right, let's see if this is improved on those quality of life issues that I had with that one, and they were just drastically worse. We've spoken about it on the podcast before, but if you haven't heard that, it's more just the sort of requirement for side missions, the level cap on story missions being far too far ahead, and really just padding out for the sake of padding out, making this game that should be a 25 to 30 hour experience into a 100-hour experience, and that's no exaggeration. For that there. So Valhalla came out, and I've just not bought it. I will vote with my wallet. Like, I don't think it's going to change anything in the grand scheme of things, but I did not buy it. I will not buy it. I'm not interested in it because it is the exact same as Odyssey, and ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, I just think it's such a shame. Because, like, as we've said a few times, I think on this podcast, we used to love the Assassin's Creed franchise.
Maybe we'll do a rise and fall of Assassin's Creed. We're kind of doing that right now, to be honest.
Yeah, it's true. Woo! God, what else?
I've felt like there's been moments in this episode where I'm just like, oh, I'm so heated and passionate about this thing, like.
Yeah, it's like rough and ready, but I think we've put out there some interesting thoughts. Perhaps for me personally, maybe I just need to make more of an effort to, like with music, you just have to dig a bit deeper and look towards the indie games that try and do
new. Yeah.
Different things, like your insides and all that.
Even like Celeste and stuff like that. There's like a gamey game that.
Because that's the beauty, right? That's the
is.
Beauty of games, is you don't actually even need any voice acting to convey feelings and interesting concepts and all the rest of it.
We'll give indie gamers, like indie devs, their due. They are the ones innovating. It's just a shame that it is on those smaller budgets. You know what I mean? It's not going to reach the same amount of people as an Assassin's Creed that could really push the boat out. But you know what? If Assassin's Creed turned around and gave you the option to be a trans character, I can tell you right now, the comments would not be nice, and that's horrid. Like, what?
Yeah.
That's the problem, is that these companies are rightly so scared to do it, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that they're rightly, they have every right to be scared to do things like that, because of the backlash that they will receive. I mean, there was a tweet that came out. We spoke about this yesterday. I can't remember the exact number. Let's say like 35,000. It might have been more. 35,000 Activision accounts on Warzone banned for offensive and racist language in their usernames. And the tweet that I saw was from a popular streamer, and he said, "This is awesome that you've done this. It's a shame that you had to do this." Like,
yeah,
why? It's 2021, and you can't tell your story because the Facebook comment section is going to go off their nut. Like, it's just so stupid, and it takes us back to, kind of brings us back to The Last of Us in full circle. Don't ever read a comment section on anything to do with The Last of Us, because it's going to be as toxic as it comes a year later. Don't look on a comment section under a Star Wars post. It's toxic so many years later after The Last Jedi came out, which I actually still staunchly defend as a fantastic movie. There's this access that people have had to voicing their opinion that everyone's entitled to their opinion, but I'm also entitled to not have to read your opinion. And that's why I choose not to click on comment sections and things like that. But, you can't help it sometimes. You come across it and it's just so let's call it, they're provocative. They're using language they're wanting to hurt someone's feelings. It's
toxic and surface level.
It's so surface level. I mean, they can't back up a point to save themselves at all. So that kind of gives me some solace that at least we can talk for an hour and a half about backing our points up, and do so. I would argue quite well, quite succinctly, as much as it's still an hour and a half podcast. There's just a lot of points to bring up for sure.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I think that sort of segues into the last thing I'll say.
Okay.
Right. Is that, are we losing sight of progress? You know, are we focusing on the wrong things? And this can be like even the talk of, all the kind of comment section fireworks about like technical performance and content, i.e. like, oh, it's not running at 4K. Oh, it's not got enough there's like literally not enough in this game to justify or
Resident
whatever.
Evil 8 is only 10 hours long.
You know, rather are we just focusing on the wrong things rather than trying to push the boat out for this cultural thing that we have, games, i.e. your BioShocks, your Portals.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
these are innovative games that still stand out to this day.
I think we're getting there, and there's even examples of, I was going to talk about, like, you know, yes, Horizon does a lot right. It's a great game, but then for me, it's like the voice acting is like so bad that it's like I'm kind of there's just a lot of dissonance still. You know, it's like I would expect a first party AAA massive PlayStation game for that side of it to be better at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that, but then that's maybe just how I see it. You know, maybe that's
fair.
never going to get better. And God, yeah, to try and tie it all back together, because there's been a lot of loose threads in this podcast. It's been very difficult to feed it from one bit to the other. But yeah, there's a lot of thoughts that I've had, I guess.
So Lewis,
and I've tried.
Do gamers need to grow up?
I think so. I think
so as well. Absolutely. I mean, if we take it from, if they want to go surface level, we'll go surface level. Stop commenting things like that. Stop being so reactionary. Let people tell the stories that they want to tell.
That's the point. You know,
that's the obvious. Yes, they need to grow up, but I think it's also, you deserve better in your games. You know, why is Ethan Winters being a bad protagonist a throwaway comment? You know, demand better. Do you know what I mean? Like, play. You know, there is better out there in terms of like storytelling, of course, and voice acting and character development and stuff like that. There might not be much in the way better of horror games, or, you know, to some people that's fine, but it can be better. Innovation happens all the time, and games stand the test of time because they innovate. We continually hear about The Last of Us, Portal, Red Dead Redemption, Grand Theft Auto 3, or Vice City or San Andreas, Fallout 3, Mass Effect. These games, every time Mario does something new on a new console, innovating and stuff like that. Breath of the Wild being an innovative game and storytelling that really has not much story in it, but its use of environmental storytelling in such a way and exploration and kind of
it's got its unique elements that succeed.
It's got its unique elements.
You know,
these are the games that are innovating. And the concern would be, and we're at the beginning of this new generation, so it's the perfect time to want innovation. We're ready for it. We've got the technology. We have the technology.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
there's no excuse now.
To innovate. There's no excuse. But you need to be open to new experiences. And new experiences. Oh my goodness! I'm sorry. It might just include a type of person that you don't like. You know what I mean? Like, goodness sake, like, just get over yourself and just, these are the stories that people want to tell. Doesn't mean you need to love them, but don't just go and leave toxic hate comments and just bog down. I mean, this is never going to change anything, but like bog down. I've never ever left like a hate comment on anything. I've never left a bad review on anything. Do you know what I mean? Like,
it is a weird concept to imagine. Yeah, because I'm the same. I'm just almost like, who are these people? Like, why?
I've never, even if I'm like, oh, I didn't like that thing, I've never been like, right, on to, Kerry and I walked out of that Harley Quinn film, the Birds of Prey one. We walked out of it whenever that came. It was just before the first lockdown. And we were just like, it was just rubbish. We were just bored watching it. It was, couldn't understand a word that anyone was saying in it. It was poorly mixed. There was a lot kind of against it. But in our opinion, and my first thought was not, I'm going to go on to the Cineworld ad that popped up on my Facebook page showing me the Harley Quinn movie, hit the comment section and type out a paragraph.
It's a funny world we live in, right?
It's so weird. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I could go on about toxic hate comments in the Star Wars community.
We'll maybe have other episodes.
There's no one I hate more than Star Wars fans, because it's like, I just hate Star Wars fans, and I'm a massive Star Wars fan, and I hate Star Wars fans. I love like my generation of Star Wars fan that like grew up in the Clone Wars and stuff like that. That are like, yeah, we like all. I mean, even if it's a bit rubbish overall, we still love it. And then there's like the people that are like, no, why is there a woman? She can't learn how to use the Force that quick. And then you're like, you do realize that Luke Skywalker, your favorite guy ever, learned to use the Force that quick. But okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'll just leave that little nugget there for you. Anyway, but this is not a Star Wars podcast. As much as I would like to start a Star Wars podcast.
Well,
do you imagine? I've started a second podcast, and it's with nobody, because I can't find anyone that would wish to do it with me.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that was not in any way, shape, or form a slight.
And also sorry for like somehow slightly getting Horizon in there and throwing it under the bus for like a hot second there.
Let it be known that we watched the gameplay for the second one, and I am so buzzed. Like, I'm just like, it's just so.
No, but I like to give things like that the benefit of the doubt, because obviously they do things, something like that does so much else right.
Yeah.
It's vocal performances and facial animations be damned, because they really are terrible. Like, really.
Yeah,
like,
they're in all honesty, like I said last time, that I praised I think the story,
the premise is cool, absolutely.
The story and the story beats in Horizon are great, but yeah, and going back and replaying it, I was just like, ooh, I didn't pick up on this in 2016, was it 2017?
17, yeah,
17. Anyway, it didn't really.
It didn't matter at the time because it was a fantastical
exactly.
world with original.
It was a
design
new IP.
And
it was a new IP. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was something new to jump into and explore. I'm so buzzed on the second one. I thought it was
oh no, definitely.
Although
I'm excited
apparently,
as well.
again, comment sections under the Facebook posts about it, like, oh, this game looks trash, and this game. No, it doesn't. It doesn't look trash. You are trash.
Hey, listen, it looks more engaging to me than Far Cry 6. I'll put it that way.
There you go.
So
yeah, gamers.
So yeah, we promise
up.
that for future episodes we will bring the temperature back down, and and
we'll maybe have a bit more of a chill one next week.
Yeah, we'll talk about other games, and
we're coming up to E3 as well, so we want to do a sort of E3 special. Talk about what we are excited about coming out of E3, but also
we still love games. Don't worry.
Yeah, we're still excited. Like, I've got 15 games on my new Xbox to go and play, so I'll go and play them.
Well, yes.
And I complain about their storytelling on the podcast.
Well, no, but the thing is, I'm so excited to play the Ori games finally, because they are decent works of art,
So yeah, gamers grow up. Is that us? You happy?
I think so.
We're going to be?
Yeah, I think so. Woo! What a journey.
What a journey.
It was messy.
There's a game. Journey.
Yes, Journey. And maybe I'll just find more ways in the future to talk about the likes of your journeys and what have you.
Your journeys and whatnot.
The Talos Principle. Hey, there's a deep cut for you.
Deep cut there. Right, well, thank you so much. If you stuck around to the end, thank you very much. We appreciate that this is probably a bit more specific to those who have played, the game in question. But, if you haven't and you stuck around, and we do appreciate that as well, you can catch us on the socials when we're posting. Episodes come out every 2 weeks on a Wednesday at midday. except from that one time. Yeah, we're trucking along. We're having fun, getting heated, doing stuff. Right. So yeah, thank you so much. Have yourself a lovely time and a lovely day. And goodbye.
Hashtag emotional resonance.
Hashtag emotional resonance. Goodbye.